Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Chapter 11, Quidditch. As they entered into November, the weather had turned very cold. The mountains around the school became gray and icy. The lake chilled like chilled steel. Every morning the ground was covered in frost. Hagrid could be seen from the upstairs window, defrosting the broomsticks on the Quidditch pitch. Bundled up in a long moleskin overcoat, rabbit fur gloves, and an enormous beaverskin boot. The Quidditch season had begun. On Saturday, Harry would be playing in his first match after weeks of training, Gryffindor versus Slytherin. If Gryffindor won, they could move up into second place into the house championship. Hardly anyone had seen Harry play because Wood decided, as their secret weapon, Harry should be kept, well, secret. But the news that he was playing secret had leaked out somehow, and Harry didn't know which was worse. People telling him he'd be brilliant, or people telling him that he'd be running around underneath him, holding a mattress. It was really lucky that Harry now had Hermione as a friend. He didn't know how he had gotten through all his homework without her. What with the last-minute Quidditch practice Wood was making them do. She also let him Quidditch Through the Ages, which turned out to be a very interesting read. Harry learned that there were 700 ways of committing a Quidditch foul, and all of them happened during a World Cup match in 1473. That seekers were usually the smallest and fastest players, and the most serious Quidditch accidents seemed to happen to them. Although people really rarely died playing Quidditch, referees had been known to vanish and turn up months later in the Sahara Desert. Hermione had become a bit more relaxed about breaking the rules since Harry and Ron had saved her from the mountain troll, and she was much nicer for it. The day before Harry's first Quidditch match, and the three of them were out in the freezing courtyard during the break, and she had conjured them up a bright blue fire which they carried around in a jam jar. They were standing with their backs to it, getting warm, when Snape crossed the yard. Harry noticed at once that Snape was limping. Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer together to block out the fire from view. They were sure it wouldn't be allowed. Unfortunately, something about their guilty faces caught Snape's eyes. He limped over. He hadn't seen the fire, but he seemed to be looking for a reason to tell them off anyway. "What's that you got there, Potter?" It was Quidditch Through the Ages, Harry showed him. "Library books are not to be taken outside the school," said Snape. "Give it to me. 5 points from Gryffindor." "He's just made that rule up," Harry muttered angrily as Snape limped away. "Wonder what's wrong with his leg." "Don't know, but I really hope it's hurting him," Ron said bitterly. The Gryffindor common room was very noisy that evening. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat together, next to a window. Hermione was checking Harry and Ron's charms homework for them. She would never let them copy. "How will you learn?" But by asking her to read through, they got the right answers anyway. Harry felt restless. He wanted Quidditch Through the Ages back, to take his mind on nerves off the game tomorrow. Why should he be afraid of Snape getting up? He told Ron and Hermione that he was going to ask Snape if he could have it back. "Rather you have it than me," they said together, but Harry had an idea that Snape wouldn't refuse if there were other teachers listening. He made his way to the staff room and knocked. There was no answer. Knocked again. Nothing. Perhaps Snape had left the book in there. It was worth a try. He pushed the door ajar and peered inside, and a horrible scene met his eyes. Snape and Filch were inside, alone. Snape was holding his robes above his knees. One of his legs was bloody and mangled. Filch was handing Snape bandages. "Blasted thing," Snape was saying. "How are you supposed to keep your eyes on all 3 heads at once?" Harry tried to shut the door quietly, but Potter! Snape's face twisted into fury as he drowned his robes quickly to hide his leg. Harry gulped. "I just wondered if I could have my book back." "Get out! Out!" Harry left before Snape could take away any more points from Gryffindor. He sprinted back upstairs. "Did you get it?" Ron asked as Harry joined them. "What's the matter?" In a low whisper, Harry told them what he had seen. "You know what this means," he finished breathlessly. "He tried to get past the 3-headed dog at Halloween. That's where he was going when we saw him. He's after whatever it's guarding, and I'd bet my broomstick he let the troll in. To create a diversion." Hermione's eyes were wide. "No, he wouldn't," she said. "I know he's not very nice, but He tried to steal something Dumbledore was keeping safe? Honestly, Hermione, you think that all the teachers are saints or something, snapped Ron. I'm with Harry. I wouldn't put anything past Snape. But what's he after? What's the dog guarding? Harry went to bed with his head buzzing with the same question. Neville was snoring loudly, but he couldn't sleep. He tried to empty his mind. He needed to sleep. He had to. His first Quidditch match was in a few hours. But the expression on Snape's face when Harry had seen his leg wasn't easy to forget. The next morning dawned very bright and cold. The great hall was full of delicious smell of fried sausages and the cheerful chatter of everyone looking forward to a good Quidditch match. You've got to eat some breakfast. It won't do anything. Just a bit of toast, wailed Hermione. I'm not hungry. Harry felt terrible. In an hour's time, he'd be walking onto the pitch. Harry, you need your strength, said Seamus Finnegan. Seekers are always the ones getting nobbled on by their own team. Thanks, Seamus, said Harry, watching Seamus pile ketchup on his sausages. By 11 o'clock, the whole school seemed to be out in the stands around for Quidditch. Many students had binoculars. The seats might have been raised high into the air, but it was still difficult to see what was going on sometimes. Harry and Hermione joined Neville, Seamus, and Dean. The West Ham fan up in the top row. A surprise for Harry, they had seen a large banner on the sheets Scabbard had ruined. It said, Potter for President, and Dean, who was good at drawing, had done a large Gryffindor lion underneath. Then Hermione had performed a tricky little charm so that the paint flashed different colors. Meanwhile, in the changing rooms, Harry and the rest of the team were changing into their scarlet Quidditch robes. Slytherin would be playing in green. Wood cleared his throat for silence. Okay, men, he said. And women, said Chaser Angelina Johnson. And women, Wood agreed. That's it. That's the big one, said Fred Weasley. That's the one we've all been waiting for, said George. We know Ollivander's speech by heart, said Fred told Harry. We were in the team last year. Shut up, you two, said Wood. This is the best Gryffindor had been in years. We are going to win. I know it. He glared at all of them as if to say, or else. Right, it's time. Good luck, all of you. Harry followed Fred and George out of the changing room, and hoping his knees weren't going to give way, he walked to the pitch to loud cheers. Madame Hooch was refereeing. She stood in the middle of the pitch, waiting for the two teams, her broom held in her hand. Now, I want a nice, fair game. All of you, she said once they were all gathered around her. Harry noticed that she seemed to be speaking particularly to the Slytherin captain, Marcus Flint, a fifth year. Harry thought Flint looked as though he had some troll blood in him. Out of one corner of his eye, he saw that the fluttering banner high above, flashing Potter for President over the crowd. His heart skipped. He felt braver. Mount your brooms, please. Harry chambered onto his Nimbus 2000. Madame Hooch gave a loud blast on her silver whistle. 15 brooms rose high into the air. They were off, and the quaffle was immediately taken by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive, too. Jordan! Sorry, Professor. The Weasley twins' friend, Lee Jordan, was doing the commentary for the match, closely watched by Professor McGonagall. And she's really belting up there. A neat pass to Alicia Snippet, a good find of Oliver Wood last year's. Only a reserve. Back to Johnson, and no, Slytherin have taken the quaffle. Slytherin Captain Marcus Flint gains the quaffle, and he goes flying like an eagle up there. He's going to score. Oh no, stopped by an excellent save by Gryffindor keeper Wood. And Gryffindor take the quaffle. That's a chaser, Katie Bell of Gryffindor. Nice dive around Flint, up the field. Ouch, that must have hurt. Hit in the back of the head by a bludger. Quaffle taken by Slytherin. That's Adrian Percy speeding off towards the goalpost. But he's blocked by a second bludger. Sent his way by Fred or George Weasley. I can't tell which. Nice play by the Gryffindor beater anyway. And Johnson back in possession as the quaffle. Clear the field ahead, and off she goes. She's really flying. Dodges a speeding bludger, and the goalposts are ahead. Come on now. Angelina. Keeper Bilchley drives. Misses. Gryffindor score. Gryffindor cheers filled with the cold air. Howls and moans from the Slytherin. Budge up there. Move along. Hagrid. Ron and Hermione squeezed together to give Hagrid enough space to join them. Been watching for me hut, said Hagrid, patting a large pair of binoculars round his neck. But it ain't the same as being in the crowd. No sign of the snitch yet, eh? Nope, said Ron. Harry hadn't much to do yet. Keep out of trouble. That's something, said Hagrid, raising his binoculars and peering skywards at the speck that was Harry. Way above them, Harry was gliding over the game, squinting for some sign of the snitch. This was part of his and Wood's game plan. Keep out of the way until you catch sight of the snitch, Wood had said. We don't want you to be attacked before you have to be. When Angelina had scored, Harry had done a couple of loop-de-loops to let out his feelings. Now he was back to staring around for the snitch. Once he caught sight of a flash of gold, but it was just a reflection from one of the Weasleys' wristwatches, and once a bludger decided to come pelting his way, more like a cannonball than anything else. But Harry dodged it, and Fred Weasley came chasing after it. All right there, Harry, he had time to yell, as he beat the bludger furiously towards Marcus Flint. Slytherin in possession, Lee Jordan was saying. Chaser Percy ducks 2 bludgers, 2 Weasleys, and Chaser Bell, and speeds towards the... Wait a moment, was that the snitch? A murmur ran through the crowd as Angelina Pussy dropped the quaffle, looking over his shoulder at the flash of gold that had passed his left ear. Harry saw it. In a great rush of excitement, he dived down towards the streak of gold. Slytherin seeker Terrence Higgs had seen it, too. Neck and neck, they hurtled towards the snitch. All the chasers seemed to have forgotten what they were supposed to be doing as they hung in mid-air to watch. Harry was faster than Higgs. He could see the little round ball, wings fluttering, darted up ahead. He pulled on an extra spurt of speed. Wham! A roar echoed from the Gryffindors below. Marcus Flint had blocked Harry on purpose, and Harry's broom spun off course, Harry holding on for dear life. Foul! Screamed the Gryffindors. Madam Hooch spoke angrily to Flint and then ordered a free shot at the goalposts for Gryffindor. But in all the confusion, of course, the golden snitch had disappeared from sight again. Down in the stands, Dean Thomas was yelling, "Send him off, ref! Red card!" "This isn't football, Dean," reminded Ron. "You can't send people off in Quidditch, and what's a red card?" But Hagrid was on Dean's side. "They ought to change the rules, Flint. Could have knocked Harry out of the air." Lee Jordan was finding it difficult not to take sides. "So, after that obvious and disgusting bit of cheating..." "Jordan!" cried Professor McGonagall. "I mean, after that open and revolting foul." "Jordan, I'm warning you." "All right," said Flint. "Nearly kills the Gryffindor Seeker, which could have happened to anyone. I'm sure plenty to Gryffindor. Taken by Spinet, who puts it away. No trouble. And we continue to play. Gryffindor still in possession." It was as Harry dodged another bludger, which went spinning dangerously past his head, that it happened. His broom had given a sudden, frightening lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to fall. He gripped the broom tightly with both hands and his knees. He had never felt anything like it. It happened again. It was as though the broom was trying to buck him off. But the Nimbus 2000 did not suddenly decide to buck riders off. Harry tried to turn back towards the Gryffindor goalpost as he had in mind to ask Wood to call time out. And then he realized that his broom was completely out of control. He couldn't turn it, he couldn't direct it at all. It was zigzagging through the air, and every now and then making violent swishing movements which almost unseated him. Lee was still commentating. "Slytherin in possession. Flint with the quaffle, passes to Spinet, passes to Bell. Hit hard in the face with a bludger. Hope it broke his nose. Only joking, Professor. Slytherin score. Oh no!" The Slytherins were now cheering. No one seemed to have noticed that Harry's broom was behaving strangely. It was carrying him slightly higher, away from the game, jerking and twisting as it went. "Don't know what Harry thinks he's doing," Hagrid mumbled. He stared at Harry through his binoculars. "If I didn't know any better, I'd say he lost control of his broom, but he can't have." Suddenly, people were pointing up at Harry all over the stands. His broom had started to roll over and over, with him only just managing to hold on to it. Then the whole crowd gasped. Harry's broom had given a wild jerk, and Harry swung off it. He was now dangling from it, holding on with only one hand. "Did something happen to it when Flint blocked him?" Seamus whispered. "Can't have," said Hagrid, his voice shaking. "Can't nothing interfere with a broomstick except powerful dark magic. No kid to do that to a Nimbus 2000. At these words, Hermione seized Hagrid's binoculars, but instead of looking up at Harry, she started looking frantically at the crowd. "What are you doing?" said Hagrid, gray-faced. "I knew it," Hermione gasped. "Snape, look! Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape was in the middle of the stands opposite them. He had his eyes fixed on Harry and was muttering non-stop under his breath. "He's doing something. Jenks in the broom," said Hermione. "Well, what should we do?" "Leave it to me." Before Ron could say another word, Hermione had disappeared. Ron turned the binoculars back on Harry. His broom was vibrating so hard it was almost impossible to hang on much longer. The whole crowd were on their feet, watching, terrified as the Weasleys flew up and tried to pull Harry safely onto their own brooms. But it was no good. Every time they got near him, the broom would jump slightly higher, then drop lower, and circle beneath him, obviously hoping to catch him if he fell. Marcus Flint seized the quaffle and scored 5 times without anyone noticing. "Come on, Hermione," Ron muttered desperately. Hermione had fought her way across the stand where Snape had stood and now racing along the row behind him. She didn't even stop to say sorry as she knocked Professor Quirrell headfirst into the row in front. Reaching Snape, she crouched down, pulled out her wand, and whispered a few well-chosen words. Bright blue flames shot from her wand from the hem of Snape's robes. It took perhaps 30 seconds for Snape to realize that he was on fire. A sudden yelp told her that she had done her job. Scooping the fire off him into a little jar in her pocket, she scrambled back along the row. Snape would never know what happened. It was enough. Up in the air, Harry was able to chamber back onto his broom. "Neville, you can look," Ron said. Neville had been sobbing into Hagrid's jacket for the last 5 minutes. Harry was speeding towards the ground when the crowd saw him clap his hands to his mouth as though he was going to be sick. He hit the pitch on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell into his hand. "I've got the snitch!" he shouted, waving it above his head, and the game ended in complete confusion. He didn't catch it. He nearly swallowed it. Flint was still howling 20 minutes later, but that made no difference. Harry hadn't broken any rules, and Lee Jordan was still happily shouting the result. Gryffindor had won by 175 points to 60. Harry heard none of this, though. He was being made a cup of strong tea back in Hagrid's hut, with Ron and Hermione. "It was Snape," Ron was explaining. "Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering. He wouldn't take his eyes off you." "Rubbish," said Hagrid, who hadn't heard a word of what was going on next to him in the stands. "Why would Snape do something like that?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at each other, wondering what to tell him. Harry decided on the truth. "I found something out about him," he told Hagrid. "He tried to get past the 3-headed dog at Halloween. It bit him. We think he was trying to steal whatever it was guarding." Hagrid dropped the teapot. "How do you know about Fluffy?" he said. "Fluffy?" "Yeah, he's mine. Bought him off a Greek chappie I met in the pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the—" "Yes?" said Harry eagerly. "No, don't ask me any more," said Hagrid gruffly. "That's top secret, that is." "But Snape's trying to steal it." "Rubbish," said Hagrid again. "Snape's a Hogwarts teacher. He'd do nothing of the sort." "So why did he just try to kill Harry?" cried Hermione. The afternoon events certainly seemed to have changed her mind about Snape. "I know a jinx when I see one," said Hagrid. "I've read all about them. You've got to keep eye contact, and Snape wasn't blinking at all. I saw him." "I'm telling you, you're wrong," said Hagrid. "I don't know why Harry's broom acted like that, but Snape would never try and kill a student. Now listen to me, all 3 of you. Your meddling in things don't concern you. It's dangerous. If you forget that dog, and you forget what it started, that's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel." "Ah," said Harry. "So there's someone called Nicholas Flamel involved, is there?" Hagrid looked furious with himself.